Most immigrants in 1700s Pennsylvania spent months, even years, drifting and renting before they settled. Caspar Glattfelder did it differently. He bought a 224-acre farm before he had been on American soil for 2 weeks, sick, freshly bereaved, and with no money to pay for it.
From the Caspar Glattfelder Association of America, this is the Glattfelder Gazette, Season 1, Episode 4.
On September 13th, 1743, roughly 14 days after he stepped off the Francis and Elizabeth still sick and freshly bereaved, Caspar and his brother-in-law, Henry Walter, put their names to a deal for 224 acres along the Conewago Creek in what is now Newberry Township, York County. They did not have the money, almost nobody did. They signed a mortgage for £66 and 10 shillings, owed to a Philadelphia man named William Parsons, and took possession of the land. The nerve and the need are wrapped up together in that. A man who had just buried family at sea, who could not yet have learned the country or its soil or its markets, committed himself to a mortgage and a property within a fortnight of landing. He had 4 children, no wife left to help raise them, and a debt now hanging over a tract of ground he had barely walked. Speed like that is the mark of a man who needs a roof and a field under his family before winter, and will not spend a year being careful about it. It is worth knowing who held the other end of that mortgage, because it tells you how exposed Caspar was. William Parsons was no ordinary lender. He was, in all likelihood, the Surveyor General of the province, a Philadelphia official near the center of how land in Pennsylvania got measured, claimed, and sold. A penniless Swiss farmer 2 weeks off the boat had bound himself in a language he was still learning to one of the men who ran the colony's land system. That is the position the hurry put him in. He owed a powerful stranger for ground he had not had time to judge. The land itself came to him the way a great deal of immigrant land did, through a middleman who never intended to farm a foot of it. William Coleman was a Philadelphia merchant, one of a number of Quaker traders who made a tidy business of buying cheap ground out in the back country and holding it until newly arrived families like Caspar's came looking. Then they sold it on at a profit. Caspar was the customer that whole arrangement was built for. He was tired, in a hurry, and in no position to shop around, so he bought what was in front of him. We do not even know for certain what he paid for it. The deed Coleman gave him was never recorded, and it disappeared generations ago, leaving a small permanent hole in the family's account of its own beginning. The best guess is that the price matched the mortgage, £66 and 10 shillings, which would mean Caspar put nothing down and owed every penny of it. Whatever the true figure, he began his American life in debt for ground he had not had the time to judge. Over the next 3 years, Caspar learned what he had actually bought. The fast purchase was a mistake. Not a ruinous one, but a mistake all the same. The Glattfelders and the Walters lived along the Conewago for about 3 years, very likely sharing the place for a while with the widow and children of Caspar's late brother, John Peter, who had crossed with them. They worked the ground and they got through, but the land carried problems no amount of labor could fix, and the more Caspar came to understand Pennsylvania, the plainer those problems became. The first was the mortgage. Paying down a debt to a Philadelphia gentleman was a heavy load for a man starting from nothing, and it may well have been heavier than the farm could bear. The second was a matter of neighbors. The country to the south held something Newberry Township lacked, which was Germans and Swiss, people who spoke Caspar's language, worshipped in his church, and could stand up as sponsors at his children's baptisms. The third reason is the one the family always kept. The Big Bend of the Conewago simply did not look like home. By family tradition, Caspar and Henry wanted hills, that called back the country around Glattfelden, and the Flat Creek ground never gave it to them. So they undid it. On August 20th, 1746, Caspar and Henry sold the Conewago property to a man named George Smizer. The price was £67, a handful of shillings more than the mortgage they had signed 3 years before. After all of it, the work and the risk and the long first push to plant a family on American ground, they walked away with almost exactly what they had started with, and not a shilling of real profit to show for it. That deed at least outlasted them. The original sale to George Smizer still sits in good condition in the collections of the Historical Society of York County, which is why we can read the 4 signatures on it nearly 280 years later. It helps to understand how little that £67 represented, because it shows how unfinished their start still was. £67 in 1743 could have bought something like 450 bushels of wheat. At the price the Penn family was then charging for unclaimed land, it could have bought roughly 450 acres of ground outright. Caspar and Henry had locked that much value into a farm for 3 years and pulled it back out, having gained, in money, essentially nothing. In the end, the Conewago years were tuition paid in full for an education in Pennsylvania ground. What Caspar did with that education is the reason the story is worth telling. He did not decide that he had failed or that crossing the ocean had been folly. He decided he had bought the wrong land, which is a very different conclusion. The same decisiveness that put him into the Conewago farm in 2 weeks pulled him out of it cleanly and pointed him south, toward the south branch of the Codorus Creek, toward German neighbors and a fold of hills that finally looked like the place he had left. That is the ground the family would hold for generations. That is the ground a little railroad village would one day take its name from. He found it because he was willing to call the first choice a mistake and move again, which is a story for another week. That same deed carries one small detail worth keeping. 4 signatures were needed to finish the sale in 1746. 3 of the 4 people made their marks, an X or a scratch, because they could not write their names. Caspar signed his. In a plain, careful hand, he wrote out the family name, spelling it the way he often did with a single T. 3 years of hard and unprofitable work, a wife and a child and a father-in-law lost to the ocean, a farm bought too fast and sold for nothing, and at the end of all of it, the man could still sit down and put his own name to the next decision. There is a steadiness in that the ledger never measured. The honest lesson here is double-edged the way real lessons usually are. Moving fast is a gift. Caspar's willingness to commit, to sign the mortgage and get his family onto land, while more careful men were still weighing their options, is part of what made him a survivor in a country that did not wait for the cautious. Moving fast is also a trap. The same speed that got him a farm in 2 weeks got him the wrong farm, because no one can learn a country in 14 days, and he had acted long before he could have known what he was buying. What saved him was the willingness to do both in sequence. He leapt when leaping was called for, and then, when the leap landed in the wrong place, he cut the loss and leapt again instead of spending a lifetime defending a bad first call. Most of us are built to do the opposite. We protect a fast decision long after we know it was wrong, because owning the mistake feels worse than quietly living with it. Caspar owned his in 3 years and moved. The whole family that came after grew from the second choice, not the first, and most of them never knew there had been a first choice at all. Caspar's real gift was the rare ability to let a wrong choice stay a detour, instead of letting it harden into a prison. He had crossed an ocean on a one-way ticket and still refused to treat any single decision as the last one he would ever be allowed to make.
If these stories mean something to you, share them with your family and invite them to subscribe. It's free at glattfelder.news/subscribe. Whatever your last name is today, Glattfelder, Glattfelter, Clodfelter, Gladfelter. This is where the family sits down and talks to itself about where it came from. Speak the names again.